It was late in the afternoon when he finally shut down his computer at work. His eyes felt heavy from staring at the screen all day, and his mind was running in too many directions at once. The city noise outside only added to it. Cars honked, people shouted, and the constant echo of movement made him feel even more tired. He walked toward the bus stop with slow steps, feeling as if the day had taken more energy than he had planned to give. He wanted silence, even for a moment. But the world around him refused to be quiet. When he reached the bus, it was already half full. The hum of conversations filled the space, and the bus engine rumbled as it pulled back onto the road. He sat near the window, hoping to lose himself in the view. But his thoughts kept circling around small worries, unfinished tasks, and the feeling that life was moving too fast. He opened his phone, looking for something that could distract him just enough to breathe. As he scrolled through the screen, a thumbnail appeared in the list of recommended videos. It was simple, just a black background with soft white text that read 15 tracks of pure beauty. Under it, a subtitle said, "The most listened to classical music ever." Something about those words made him pause. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the promise of calm. Or maybe it was just the need for something different after such a long day. He clicked on it. The bus noise stayed the same. But the moment the music began, something inside him softened. The first piece had gentle strings, rising slowly like the sound of early morning light passing through a quiet window. He didn't know the name of the piece, but it didn't matter. He felt as if the music was speaking to a part of him that he hadn't listened to in years. The sounds were soft but strong, warm but full of meaning. For a brief moment, the world around him seemed to fade. The traffic noise was still there, but his focus shifted from the outside world to the notes flowing through his headphones. His breathing slowed. His shoulders relaxed. His mind stopped racing. It was the first time all day he felt like he had room to think. He didn't know much about classical music. To him, it had always seemed like something distant, something played in large halls by people wearing expensive clothes. But this music felt simple, human, and honest. It didn't ask him for anything. It only offered a feeling, one of peace, one of comfort. As the bus moved through the crowded streets, he found himself watching the world outside in a different way. The people on the sidewalks, the shops closing their doors for the day, the children running ahead of their parents, it all looked softer, calmer. The music seemed to change the way he saw everything. When the first track ended and a new piece began, the mood shifted slightly. The second melody carried a sound that felt familiar, though he couldn't place why. It reminded him of something distant, perhaps a moment from his childhood. He remembered sitting near the window of his old home during rainy days, listening to the gentle sound of water hitting the roof. He didn't know why the memory came back, but the music brought it to him with surprising clarity. He smiled quietly. It was the first real smile he had felt since morning. The playlist continued, one piece transitioning into the next. Some were slow and warm, others quick and bright. Each track carried a story he didn't know, created by someone who lived many years before him. People who had their own struggles, their own joys, their own quiet moments like this. Somehow, the music felt like a bridge between their world and his. When he reached his stop, he didn't get off right away. The music held him in place. He sat for a moment longer, listening to the last notes of the fourth piece before removing his headphones. He stepped off the bus feeling lighter than when he had stepped on. The sky was turning a deep shade of blue as he walked home. Streetlights flickered on one by one. The playlist had finished by the time he reached his door, but the feeling remained. It was as if the music had followed him inside. Bringing quiet with it, he changed his clothes, made himself a simple meal, and sat by the window. The night air was cool, and the street outside was calm. Instead of turning on the television like he usually did, he opened the playlist again. There was something comforting about it, something steady. He pressed play. The fifth piece began with a soft piano melody. Each note was gentle but clear, rising and falling like a slow breath. He wondered who had created such a piece. Maybe the composer was alone when writing it. Maybe they were thinking about something they couldn't put into words. Maybe they simply wanted to create something beautiful. He didn't know the story behind the music, but he felt it, and that was enough. He listened to the entire playlist from start to finish. 10 more tracks passed before he realized how much time had gone by. The room around him felt different, not quieter, but calmer. He had felt tired earlier, but now he felt settled in a way he hadn't felt in months. He looked around his small living room, noticing things he usually ignored: the way the warm light touched the wall, the way the curtain moved slightly with the breeze, the way his mind felt strangely clear. He hadn't expected the playlist to affect him this much. He had clicked on it only because he was tired, but now it felt like he had found something important. He wondered why so many people had listened to these same 15 tracks. What had they felt? What had these pieces meant to them? The video title had said they were the most listened to classical music ever. That meant millions of people around the world had felt what he was feeling right now. Peace, calm, and a quiet kind of joy. The thought made him feel connected to them. Even though he didn't know any of them, he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The playlist ended again, but his mind still held the sound. It was like the music had found a small place inside him where it could rest. A place he didn't know he needed. He thought about how the day had started, full of noise and stress. Now, everything felt different. He wasn't sure how something as simple as a playlist could change his mood so deeply, but he didn't need to understand it. Some things in life didn't need explanations. They just needed to be felt before going to bed. He added the playlist to his favorites. He knew he would listen again. Maybe tomorrow on the bus. Maybe tonight before sleeping. Maybe during moments when the world felt too loud. He didn't know it yet. But this small discovery would soon grow into a much bigger part of his life. The music he had found by accident would guide him through future mornings, quiet nights, and unexpected challenges. But for now, all he knew was that the day had ended better than he expected. He turned off the lights and lay down, letting the last sound of the playlist echo softly in his mind. A strange calm covered him like a warm blanket, and before he knew it, he drifted into sleep, carrying with him the simple beauty of those 15 tracks that had already begun to change the way he saw the world. The next morning began like any other, but something felt slightly different. He woke up before his alarm rang, not because he was anxious or unable to sleep, but because his mind was clearer. The memory of last night's music still sat quietly in his thoughts, as if the soft notes had followed him into the morning. He stretched slowly, letting the early light fill the room. Usually he would rush to get ready, but today he took his time. While brushing his teeth, he remembered the playlist again. He picked up his phone, scrolled through his favorites, and pressed play. The gentle sound of a slow piano piece filled the room. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple, comforting, and warm. As he listened, he felt a calm he hadn't felt in years. He made breakfast with the music playing in the background. Even the small routine moments, boiling water, slicing bread, pouring tea, felt easier. The usual heaviness that came with mornings had softened. He caught himself humming along, even though he didn't know the tune well. When he left home, the air outside was cool and fresh. He put on his headphones and let the music guide his steps toward the bus stop. The street was busy with people heading to work, but he didn't feel the usual tension that came with the crowd. Instead, each note helped him stay in his own small bubble of peace. He reached work earlier than normal. His colleagues were already settling in, typing on keyboards and talking quietly. The office looked the same, but the way he felt was different. He took his seat, opened his laptop, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel the familiar wave of stress. He kept thinking about the playlist and the unexpected comfort it brought. During his lunch break, he sat alone near the window with his headphones on. He decided to explore more about the music he had heard the night before. He wasn't trying to become an expert. He was simply curious. He wanted to understand why these pieces felt so powerful. He searched the first track he remembered, something with soft strings that made him feel calm. The name that appeared on the screen surprised him. It was a composer he had heard about before, but never paid attention to. He looked up the story behind the piece. It turned out the composer had written it during a difficult time in his life. Even though the music sounded peaceful, it carried emotions from someone who had struggled deeply. He read more, feeling a strange connection to the story. He wasn't a musician, and he didn't play any instruments, but he felt something familiar in those words. Maybe it was because everyone at some point carried their own worries, fears, and hopes. The idea that someone from hundreds of years ago had felt the same things made him feel less alone. When he returned to work, his mind drifted back to what he had learned. The idea stayed with him throughout the day. Every time he felt a little stressed, he thought of the music again. Without realizing it, he had begun forming a bond with the playlist. That evening, after reaching home, he opened the playlist once again. He didn't force himself to listen. He simply let the music play while he cooked dinner. The melodies filled the small space, making his home feel warmer than usual as he ate. He watched videos explaining how certain classical pieces were created. Some stories were simple and joyful. Others were filled with sadness, heartbreak, or difficult experiences. Yet each piece sounded beautiful in its own way. It amazed him how something created from pain could turn into something that brought peace to others. He remembered reading that one composer wrote an entire piece while almost completely deaf. He paused, letting that thought sink in. How could anyone create such beauty without hearing the sound? The more he learned, the more he felt drawn into this world of music that he had never cared for before. Later that night, he sat on the couch with his notebook. He didn't plan to write anything, but his hand moved almost on its own. He began writing small notes how the music made him feel, what he had learned, and why it mattered to him. It wasn't for a project or assignment. He wrote because he wanted to remember everything clearly. It felt personal, like discovering a new part of himself he didn't know existed. He closed the notebook and leaned back. The playlist was still going in the background. The 8th track started, filled with soft violins that floated gently like a warm breeze. He closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. He didn't think about work, deadlines, or stress. He just listened. Over the next few days, the playlist became a steady part of his life. He listened during breakfast, on the bus, during breaks, and before bed. Each piece carried a different emotion. Some filled him with comfort. Others reminded him of small, forgotten memories, moments from childhood, simple family evenings, or the feeling of being safe on quiet, rainy days. The music didn't magically solve every problem. His job was still demanding, and the world around him was still noisy. But the way he handled everything changed slowly. The music gave him a sense of balance. It reminded him that emotions, both good and bad, had a place in life. One morning, while sipping tea by the window, he found himself smiling for no clear reason. He realized the music had become a companion, something that stayed with him even when it wasn't playing. It had found a small space inside him, helping him move through each day with a calmer heart. On the weekend, he decided to visit the nearby public library. He hadn't been there in years. He walked through the quiet aisles, searching for books about classical music. At first, he felt out of place, but soon he found himself flipping through pages filled with stories about different composers and the lives they lived. Some had lived through hardships. Some had incredible talent from childhood. Some had suffered great loss. All of them had poured pieces of their souls into their music. As he read, he felt a deep respect for each of them. They weren't distant figures anymore. They were people, real people who had lived real lives full of emotions. They had created music not just to entertain, but to express. What they couldn't say in words, he borrowed a few books and spent the afternoon reading at home. The more he learned, the more he felt connected to the playlist. Every track held a story, and now he wanted to understand them. The music wasn't just something to hear, it was something to feel. That evening, he decided to share the playlist with someone close to him. He messaged a friend, writing a simple note. "You should listen to this when you're tired." It helped me feel calm. He didn't expect much, but it felt right to share something that meant so much to him. A few hours later, the friend replied, saying the music had helped them relax after a long day. Reading that message made him smile. He felt a quiet joy knowing that something which brought him peace could do the same for someone else. As the days passed, he began to notice small changes in himself. He was more patient with people. He felt more present in conversations. He didn't rush through moments the way he used to. Whenever he felt overwhelmed, he put on the playlist and let the music guide him back to calm. One night, while listening to a slow piano piece, he wondered why the playlist had touched him so deeply. Maybe it was because life often felt too fast, too loud, and too heavy. The music gave him space to breathe. Or maybe it was because the emotions in the music felt real, something he could relate to. Whatever the reason, he was grateful for it. He looked around his home, feeling a sense of peace. The music played softly, filling the quiet space with warmth. He didn't know where this new journey with classical music would lead him. He only knew that it had already made his life brighter. He sat near the window again, watching the night sky. As another track began, he closed his eyes and let the music carry him. This simple playlist had become a part of his everyday life, and he felt thankful for whatever moment led him to click on it. He didn't know it yet. But this growing connection to music would soon open new doors. New thoughts and new experiences he had never imagined. For now, he simply sat in the gentle glow of the night, letting the soft notes surround him like a quiet, comforting embrace. The days that followed carried a gentle rhythm, almost like the calm rise and fall of a soft melody. He didn't plan for it, but the playlist slowly started shaping the way he lived. Each morning, he woke up feeling slightly lighter than before. It wasn't a dramatic change, but it was real. The simple act of hearing those familiar notes in the morning helped him begin his day with more peace and focus. One morning, he woke before the sun. The sky outside was still dim, painted with shades of soft gray. He sat by the window with a warm drink in his hand, listening to the music he had grown attached to. As the slow piano piece filled the quiet room, he felt a deep sense of stillness that he had never noticed before in his daily life. It was a small moment, but it meant something. On the way to work, the bus felt less crowded and noisy than usual. He knew the noise was still there, the loud chatter, the engine rumbling, the honking outside, but his mind didn't cling to it the same way. The music in his ears helped him stay centered in his own space. When he reached the office, he noticed something others might have overlooked. His tasks didn't feel like battles anymore. Instead of rushing through everything with tense shoulders and a busy mind, he found himself moving calmly from one task to another. The playlist had taught him something he didn't expect, that sometimes peace wasn't about escaping life, but about finding small pockets of calm within it. During breaks, he grabbed his phone and returned to the music. He didn't do it out of habit, but out of a quiet desire to feel grounded again. He looked forward to those few minutes alone with the melodies. A few days later, something unusual happened. He was working through a difficult task when one of his coworkers stopped by his desk. They mentioned that he seemed calmer lately. They said he handled pressure differently, almost like he carried a quiet strength inside him. He didn't know how to respond at first. He wasn't trying to be different. He wasn't practicing anything. He was simply listening to music. On his way home that evening, the idea stayed with him. Could music really change a person this much? The question stayed in his mind as he listened to the playlist again on the ride home. When he reached his apartment, he placed his bag on the table and sat down on the couch. He pressed play again, but this time he listened differently. Instead of focusing on how the music made him feel, he paid attention to the details, the soft notes of the piano, the gentle movements of the strings, the way each piece carried its own emotion as the 10th track played. He thought about something he had learned from the book he borrowed at the library. The author had written that classical music had the power to calm the mind because it followed patterns that the brain naturally found comforting. He didn't completely understand the science behind it, but the idea made sense. The notes seemed to flow in a way that helped him breathe, think, and feel more clearly. Later that week, he decided to bring the playlist into a different part of his life. He had been meaning to clean his apartment for days, but he always ended up procrastinating. That evening, instead of forcing himself into the task, he put on the playlist and let it play as he cleaned. To his surprise, the music made the work feel lighter. What usually felt boring and tiring suddenly became peaceful. He moved around the apartment with a sense of ease he didn't expect. When he finished, the place looked neat and calm. He sat down and felt a soft wave of satisfaction. That night, after dinner, he lay on the couch and closed his eyes. The playlist continued to play softly. He imagined himself in an open field with warm sunlight touching the grass. He imagined the sound of wind moving through trees. The music made these images feel vivid and comforting. He slowly realized that the playlist wasn't just something he listened to, it had become part of his emotional world. It helped him feel grounded when he was overwhelmed, calm when he felt restless, and hopeful when life felt heavy. One afternoon, while at work, he noticed something unusual. Normally, he avoided conversations because they drained him. But that day, he felt more open. When a colleague shared their worries about something, he listened with patience. He found himself offering advice with a calm voice. The colleague thanked him, saying they felt better after talking. He wasn't sure what had changed, but he felt grateful for it. On the bus ride home that day, he reflected on the past few weeks. He had discovered a part of himself he didn't know existed, a calmer, more present version of himself. He wondered how something as simple as music could help him evolve without him even trying. At home, he made dinner and sat at the table with the music playing in the background. The more he listened, the more he realized that each track had its own way of speaking to him. Some pieces felt like warm memories, while others felt like gentle encouragement. One particular track, one with soft violins that swelled slowly, began to mean more to him than the others. He didn't know why, but the moment it played, he felt a quiet ache inside. Not sadness, but something tender, something human. He played that track again and again. Each time, it felt like peeling back a layer of emotion he didn't know he had buried. Maybe it reminded him of someone. Maybe it reminded him of a moment in his life that he had tried to forget. Or maybe it reminded him that even difficult emotions had a place in life. As the evening deepened, he stepped outside onto the small balcony. The city lights glowed softly in the distance. The music played through his headphones, blending with the sound of the wind. It felt like a moment suspended in time, one that carried a special kind of calm. The playlist continued, track after track, guiding him into a peaceful state he didn't want to lose. He stayed outside for a long time, letting his thoughts drift. He remembered moments from childhood, running barefoot in the yard, chasing fireflies with his siblings. Hearing the distant sound of rain on warm nights, he realized that the music wasn't creating new feelings, it was helping him reconnect with emotions he once held but had forgotten as life grew busy. Later that night, he sat on the floor near his bed with the lights turned low. He thought about how different his life felt now. It wasn't perfect, and he still had worries, but the music had become a quiet guide. It had helped him find balance and calm in the middle of chaos. Before sleeping, he wrote in his notebook again. This time, he wrote about how the music was helping him grow. He wrote about the unexpected comfort it brought him, how it made his days feel softer. He wrote about small changes to how he was sleeping better, how his mornings felt easier, how his heart felt lighter. As he finished writing, he replayed the playlist once more. The soft melodies filled the room like a warm embrace. He closed his eyes and let the notes wrap around him. He felt grateful for the moment when he first clicked on the playlist. It had been a simple choice on a tiring day, but it had led him down a path he didn't expect. A path that helped him reconnect with himself. The night grew quiet. He lay down and let the last track fade into silence. His breathing slowed, his mind softened, and before long, he drifted into sleep once again, carried by the gentle memory of the music that had become a steady companion in his life. He didn't know what the coming days would bring, but he felt ready for them. With the playlist by his side, he felt he could move through the world with more strength, more patience, and more peace than he ever had before. The weeks continued to pass, and his connection to the playlist kept growing in ways he never expected. It no longer felt like a simple collection of music. It felt like a companion, something that stayed with him through the quiet mornings, the stressful afternoons, and the peaceful nights. What surprised him even more was how each piece began to shape his thoughts and memories. One Friday evening, he left work feeling more tired than usual. It had been a long week, filled with deadlines and unexpected tasks. Even though he tried to stay calm, the pressure had finally caught up with him. As he walked toward the bus stop, He felt the familiar heaviness in his chest. But this time, instead of pushing it away, he reached for his headphones. The moment the first track played, the tension in his shoulders eased. He could almost feel the notes lifting the weight off him. The soft strings reminded him of the first time he had heard the playlist. It had been such a simple moment, but it had changed so much in his life. When he reached home that night, he didn't turn on the lights right away. He sat on the floor, still wearing his headphones, letting the music settle the leftover stress from the week. The room was dim, but it felt warm, almost comforting. As he listened, he felt tears gather slowly in his eyes, not from sadness, but from a strange, deep feeling he couldn't explain. It was as if the music was touching something inside him he had ignored for too long. After a few minutes, he took a deep breath and wiped his eyes. He wasn't embarrassed. It felt natural, almost necessary. Sometimes emotions came in quiet moments, carried by the softness of a melody. Later that night, he sat on his bed, scrolling through his phone. He found a short documentary about one of the composers whose pieces were in the playlist. He decided to watch it. The video showed old paintings of the composer, old halls where orchestras played, and pages of handwritten music. The narrator talked about how the composer had written his most beloved works during times of deep personal struggle. He felt something shift inside him as he listened. He had always thought classical music came from perfect lives, from people untouched by hardship. But the truth was the opposite. Many of these pieces were created by people who had experienced pain, loneliness, illness, and heartbreak. And yet, from those emotions, they shaped something beautiful. That night, he lay awake thinking about that truth. It made the music feel even more human to him, more real. He felt closer to the composers, even though they had lived centuries ago. The next morning, he woke early, with the thoughts still on his mind. He decided to spend the day doing something different. Instead of staying home, he searched for places where he could experience classical music in a real setting. To his surprise, he found a small community concert happening not too far from his home. A local orchestra was performing a mix of well-known classical pieces, and one of the tracks from his playlist was on the list. He had never been to a live performance before. The thought of going made him nervous, but at the same time, it felt like the right thing to do. He got ready slowly, choosing simple clothes that made him feel comfortable. When he stepped outside, the morning sun was gentle. The air felt fresh. When he reached the small hall, he felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty. People of different ages were walking inside, some dressed neatly, some casually, all with a calm look on their faces. He took a deep breath and followed them. Inside the hall, the lights were warm and the stage was set with chairs, music stands, and shiny instruments that reflected the soft glow of the room. He chose a seat near the middle so he could see everything clearly. The hall slowly filled with people, and the quiet chatter carried a peaceful energy. When the musicians walked onto the stage, the audience applauded. He felt a sense of anticipation as the conductor stepped forward. The hall fell silent, and then the music began. The first piece was gentle. In the moment the notes flowed across the hall, he felt his chest tighten, not in stress, but in awe. The sound felt different from what he heard through headphones. It was warm, real, alive. The strings moved together like a single breath, and the soft harmony seemed to float in the air. He sat completely still, absorbing every sound. It felt like the music was touching him in a new way, deeper and clearer than before. As the performance continued, each piece brought a new emotion. Some felt bright and joyful, others soft and nostalgic, but there was one moment that stood out above all. When the orchestra began playing the piece from his playlist, the one that always touched him deeply, he felt his heart beat faster. Hearing it live brought back memories with surprising intensity. He remembered the day he first listened to the playlist on the bus, the evening he sat alone in the dark with the music, the moments when the melodies helped him breathe easier. Everything came together in this single moment. It felt like the music was speaking directly to him. He closed his eyes for a few seconds, letting the sound wash through him. He didn't expect to feel so emotional, but he welcomed it. It reminded him that he was alive, that he could still feel deeply. When the piece ended, he opened his eyes and saw others wiping their cheeks quietly. He realized he wasn't the only one touched by the music. It comforted him to know that the emotions he felt were shared by others in the room. After the concert, he walked slowly toward the exit. The night air outside was cool and calm. He took a long breath and felt something peaceful inside him. The experience had changed him in a subtle but meaningful way. On the ride home, he didn't listen to anything. He wanted the memory of the live performance to stay clear in his mind without being covered by more sound. He leaned his head against the window and watched the lights pass by as he replayed every moment in his head. When he reached home, he sat on the couch and closed his eyes. He could still feel the music echoing inside him. It was strange how something created by people he never met could shape his emotions so deeply as the days went on. He noticed that he listened to the playlist with even more connection than before. The music now carried the memory of the concert, the warm lights, the quiet audience, the gentle movements of the musicians. Each piece felt richer and fuller. One evening, as he sat with the playlist playing softly, he thought about why the music meant so much to him. Maybe it was because it reminded him of moments he had forgotten. Maybe it helped him understand emotions he had avoided. Or maybe it simply allowed him to feel human again in a world that often pushed him to be busy, fast, and distant. He didn't have the answer, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't the same person he had been before discovering the playlist. The music had opened a quiet doorway inside him, one that led to reflection, memories, and a deeper understanding of himself. He sat by the window once again, looking at the calm night sky. The moonlight fell softly across the buildings. As another track played, he closed his eyes and let out a slow breath. He felt grateful. Grateful for the playlist. Grateful for the composers. Grateful for the unexpected peace that had entered his life. And deep inside, he felt ready for whatever would come next. Whether it was joy or difficulty, he knew he had something steady to carry with him, quiet. Beautiful companion made of 15 pieces of pure sound. He didn't know what the future would bring. But he knew this. The music had become part of him. And that connection would only grow stronger with time. The days that followed felt different in a way the man could not fully explain. He did not make any grand decision or promise to himself, but something inside him had quietly shifted. The music that had once been a simple playlist was now part of his daily life, almost like a companion he never knew he needed. It was not just about beautiful sounds anymore. It had become a voice that guided him through moments of silence, helped him think clearly, and reminded him that calmness was always somewhere close. He continued listening every morning before leaving home. He liked how the soft notes filled the quiet room while the sun slowly came through the window. It made him feel grounded before the busy day began. Sometimes he would stand still, close his eyes, and let the music wash over him. In those moments, he felt like everything slowed down. His thoughts, which used to rush in different directions, now moved at a peaceful pace at work. People around him noticed that he seemed more centered than before. He was not easily stressed, and he spoke gently even in tense situations. Some coworkers asked him what had changed. He would smile and say he had found something that helped him keep his balance, though he did not go into too much detail. Not everyone understood the effect that classical music could have, but he knew it was something that needed to be felt, not explained. One afternoon, while taking a short break, he opened the playlist again. He scrolled through the 15 tracks he now knew so well. Each one carried a memory. One track reminded him of the rainy night when he discovered the playlist. Another reminded him of a long drive when he had been lost in thought. Another reminded him of a quiet evening at home when he felt at peace for the first time in a long while. These were more than just small moments. They were milestones on a path he did not plan, but was grateful to have walked as the music continued to play in the background. He realized that these pieces had survived hundreds of years not because of fame or tradition, but because they carried a kind of truth. The notes were simple, yet full of emotion. They expressed feelings that were hard to put into words: hope, sadness, longing, joy. They were a reminder that people from different times felt the same things he felt now. Even though life had changed in many ways, the human heart was still the same. He thought about the composers again. Men who lived in different times, faced different challenges, and yet created music that still touched millions today. He imagined them sitting alone in small rooms, writing melodies late into the night. Perhaps they did not know their work would travel so far into the future. Perhaps they just wanted to express something they carried inside. This thought made him appreciate the music even more. It made him feel connected to people he would never meet. One weekend, he visited a small music hall in the city. A local orchestra was performing, and he recognized one of the pieces from the playlist. He sat quietly between strangers, waiting for the performance to begin. The hall was warm and softly lit, creating a peaceful atmosphere. When the musicians lifted their instruments, the room fell silent. The first note was enough to give him chills. It sounded richer and more powerful than any recording he had heard. The music moved through the air like a living thing, filling every corner of the room. He felt his chest tighten with emotion. Even though he had listened to the track many times, hearing it live was different. It felt like the music was speaking directly to him. As the performance continued, he found himself lost in the moment. He forgot about the world outside. He forgot about stress, deadlines, and responsibilities. All that existed was the sound rising and falling around him. The experience was overwhelming, but in a gentle way. When the piece finally came to an end, he realized his eyes were wet. He wiped them quickly, hoping nobody noticed. Walking out of the hall that evening, he felt lighter than he had in years. The cool night air brushed against his face, and he let out a deep breath. Something inside him had opened. The music had touched a part of him he rarely paid attention to, the quiet part, the soft part, the part that needed care. In the days that followed, listened with new appreciation. He paid attention to the small details in the music, the soft pauses, the sudden rises, the moments when the melody felt like it was almost whispering. He realized those details were like moments in life that people often ignored. Small pauses, small joys, small moments of calm. Those were the things that made life beautiful. One morning, while listening to a slow, gentle track, he began to reflect on how far he had come. Months earlier, he had been drowning in noise, feeling stressed and disconnected from himself. Now he could sit quietly and feel at peace. It was not a dramatic transformation, but it was real. The music had guided him step by step. Without asking for anything in return, he also started sharing the playlist with more people. Whenever he noticed someone feeling anxious or overwhelmed, he would tell them about the tracks that helped him. Some people thanked him later. They said the music helped them sleep better or helped them think clearly. Hearing this made him happy. He felt like he was passing forward something meaningful. One day, he created a small tradition for himself. Every evening before going to bed, he played one track from the playlist. Just one. He would sit quietly, close his eyes, and let the music settle the noise of the day. Sometimes it brought back memories. Sometimes it simply made him breathe deeper. Every time, it helped him end the day gently. As time passed, he collected more classical pieces, but the original 15 tracks always remained special. They were the ones that opened the door. The ones that guided him through confusion, helped him slow down, and helped him feel again. They held a kind of purity he never found elsewhere. Months later, he found himself sitting by the window on a calm afternoon, listening to one of the familiar tracks. The sky outside was soft with colors, and a warm breeze moved through the room. He thought about how different his life felt compared to the day he first clicked on the playlist. Back then, he had been stressed, overwhelmed, and disconnected from himself. Now, he felt grounded, steady, and more aware of his emotions. He did not credit the music with changing his life completely, but it had played a part, a gentle, steady part, like a hand on his shoulder reminding him to slow down, a soft voice telling him he did not have to carry everything alone. He realized that the true beauty of these classical pieces was not in the notes themselves, but in the spaces between them, the moments where the music breathed, the places where the sound dipped softly, creating silence that felt safe. That silence reminded him that calmness was not something people chased. It was something they allowed. As he sat there, he felt grateful. Grateful for the playlist. Grateful for the music. Grateful for the quiet moments that helped him find himself again. The journey had not been loud or dramatic. It had been soft, gentle, and steady, just like the tracks he had come to love. In the end, he understood why millions of people listened to these same pieces every day. The music did not just enter the ears, it entered the heart. It reminded people of who they were beneath the noise. And for him, it had become something he would carry for the rest of his life. The 15 tracks were no longer just music. They were part of his story. A story that began by accident but guided him toward peace he never expected to find.